Hello, I'm Hope Logan. I'm an actor on Bold and the Beautiful, and many people really love both me and our Bold and the Beautiful drama. So I've come here to share updates about my beloved Bold and the Beautiful. Everyone, please subscribe and support me. If you do, I will keep coming every day with new updates for you. In the dramatic world of the Bold and the Beautiful, the fallout from Hope Logan's shocking decision was only beginning to unfold. And over the next 2 weeks, the emotional storm brewing beneath the surface promised to shake every powerful family in Los Angeles to its core. What had started as a bold and unexpected move by Hope Logan Spencer was now setting off a chain reaction no one could fully control, sending shockwaves through both the Logan and Forrester families. The fashion world, already buzzing with scandal and disbelief, stood frozen as one of its brightest names made a decision that changed the balance of power overnight. Alliances were shifting, trust was beginning to fracture, and old wounds were reopening faster than anyone could stop them. Behind every elegant runway, behind every polished public smile, deeply personal betrayals were beginning to emerge. And as June faded into July, the consequences of Hope's explosive announcement were about to become impossible for anyone to ignore. As the week of June 29th through July 3rd began, the atmosphere surrounding the Spencer family was filled with a sense of triumph, unlike anything they had felt in recent memory. After weeks of uncertainty and behind-the-scenes maneuvering, the Spencers finally had reason to celebrate, basking in what felt like a hard-earned victory at Logan. But while they enjoyed the sweet taste of success, the mood inside Forrester Creations couldn't have been more different. Inside those iconic walls, panic had quietly begun to spread as the Forresters scrambled desperately to contain the damage caused by Hope's stunning betrayal. Industry insiders and media outlets immediately turned their attention toward the unfolding corporate drama, flooding the company with difficult questions. The press wanted answers, and those answers were becoming harder to control now that Hope had officially crossed enemy lines and aligned herself with an entirely different fashion house. For the powerful Forrester family, this wasn't simply business competition anymore. It had become something painfully personal. Eric Forrester soon found himself facing an entirely different kind of disappointment when he uncovered a truth that cut deeper than the professional crisis already consuming him. His own wife, Donna Logan Forrester, had known about Hope's connection to Logan and the brewing betrayal long before everything exploded publicly. The realization struck Eric harder than he expected, not because of the business implications, but because trust inside his own marriage had suddenly been compromised. The woman he loved had kept an enormous secret from him, and in that painful moment, Eric couldn't ignore the sting of feeling blindsided by someone who was supposed to stand beside him no matter what. What made the situation even worse was knowing that the betrayal hadn't come from an outside enemy. It had come from within his own family circle. The emotional damage was beginning to rival the corporate chaos itself. At the same time, another painful betrayal was unfolding for Electra Forrester, who suddenly found herself questioning everything she thought she knew about the person closest to her. She learned that Will Spencer had deliberately kept major secrets from her, including Hope's shocking hiring decision and the launch of a new jewelry collection that prominently featured the dazzling Hope for the Future diamond as its centerpiece. For Electra, the hurt ran far deeper than simple business secrecy. The realization that Will had excluded her from something this important made her feel isolated, disrespected, and painfully undervalued. Every memory of recent conversations now played differently inside her mind as she began piecing together how much had been hidden from her. The beach house they shared, once a place of comfort and security, suddenly felt emotionally suffocating. And now, standing at a crossroads, Electra faced a painful decision about whether walking away might be the only way to reclaim control of her shattered trust. Meanwhile, elsewhere in Los Angeles, Deacon Sharp was experiencing his own complicated moment in the aftermath of the explosive fashion show. Among the crowd, Remy Price approached him with congratulatory words, acknowledging the success surrounding the recent chaos. But beneath Remy's polite words was something far more desperate, a plea for redemption. He wanted another opportunity, another chance to prove himself and somehow repair the damage connected to his past mistakes. Yet Deacon wasn't prepared to offer forgiveness so easily. Though part of him understood second chances better than most people ever could, the timing felt wrong, and the wounds connected to past betrayals remained far too fresh. For now, Remy would leave disappointed, realizing the road toward redemption remained painfully out of reach. Across town, emotional tensions inside the Logan family were escalating faster than anyone anticipated, especially for Brooke Logan Forrester. Already struggling to process Hope's controversial decision, Brooke's frustration reached a boiling point when she turned her anger directly toward Katie Logan Spencer. Brooke became furious after learning Katie had actively helped recruit Hope, effectively playing a major role in the betrayal now tearing families apart. For Brooke, this wasn't simple disagreement between sisters. This was a deeply personal wound caused by family members choosing sides against one another. Her voice carried years of accumulated pain as she warned Katie that this conflict was far from over. In her eyes, what had started as business rivalry had officially become family warfare, and the hostility now rising between the Logan women was only beginning to reveal how destructive this situation might ultimately become. Not long afterward, Hope herself found the courage to confront the emotional devastation left in her wake. Fully aware of how deeply her actions had hurt her mother, she approached Brooke carrying a mixture of guilt, hope, and quiet desperation. More than anything, Hope needed forgiveness. She desperately wanted Brooke to understand why she had made the difficult choices that led her here, and even more importantly, she longed for her mother to find a way to genuinely feel happy for her, despite everything that had happened. But Brooke had been pushed dangerously close to her breaking point. The overwhelming pressure from family betrayal, professional humiliation, and emotional exhaustion had left her patience nearly destroyed. Rather than embracing Hope with understanding, Brooke seemed increasingly likely to respond in explosive fashion, possibly going so far as forcing both Hope and Liam Spencer out of her home entirely as the emotional weight became simply too much to bear. Yet for all the explosive confrontations already brewing, an even more dangerous showdown appeared to be waiting just over the horizon. As the story moved toward the week of July 6th through July 10th, tensions between Hope and Steffy Forrester Finnegan were building toward an inevitable collision that promised absolute fireworks. There was simply no world where Steffy would quietly accept what Hope had done. Betrayal, anger, humiliation, resentment, every painful emotion Steffy had spent years burying where Hope was concerned suddenly threatened to erupt all at once. She would undoubtedly demand answers and unleash every ounce of fury she had been holding inside. But just when the confrontation seemed ready to spiral completely out of control, Liam might step forward unexpectedly, placing himself directly between the two women. His instinct to protect Hope could completely change the battle lines in ways nobody saw coming. What Steffy didn't yet fully understand, however, was a revelation capable of reopening wounds she thought had already scarred over. There remained a very real possibility that she would soon discover Liam had been the true architect behind Hope's shocking decision to switch companies and launch the brand new Logan line. If that truth surfaced, Steffy's feelings of betrayal would intensify beyond anything she was currently experiencing. It wouldn't simply be Hope who had deceived her. Liam himself would suddenly become part of the betrayal. Every ounce of trust Steffy still carried for him could begin disintegrating in an instant. Old emotional scars connected to their complicated history would tear open once again, and a conflict that initially centered around fashion and business could quickly transform into something far more painful and deeply personal. Even while the glamorous world of fashion descended further into chaos, another dangerous storyline quietly continued unfolding in the shadows. Sheila Carter, never one to stay silent for long, still had unfinished business involving Taylor Hayes. Determined as ever, Sheila wanted answers regarding the ongoing divorce demands that had created growing tension behind closed doors. She remained absolutely unwilling to sign the divorce papers placed in front of her, refusing to cooperate unless one very specific condition was met. Sheila's demand was simple in theory, but emotionally explosive in practice. She wanted Taylor to convince Steffy to grant her visitation rights. Not permanent access, not full reconciliation, but 2 precious days every month with both John Finnegan and young Hayes Finnegan. For Sheila, this demand represented far more than legal negotiation. It was about family, obsession, and a desperate refusal to lose the fragile connection she still believed belonged to her. Taylor, however, understood the emotional disaster this request threatened to create. She knew Steffy was already emotionally overwhelmed by the endless Logan-related chaos consuming every part of her life. The timing couldn't possibly be worse. Steffy was angry, frustrated, vulnerable, and balancing more pressure than most people around her fully understood. Taylor could only warn Sheila that pushing this issue now would likely provoke another explosive reaction. But Sheila had never been known for patience, especially when denied access to the people she cared about most. Refusing to back down, she urged Taylor to stop delaying and start putting the process in motion immediately, regardless of how unstable the situation already felt. And unfortunately for Deacon, the storm surrounding Sheila was far from finished. As someone deeply entangled in Sheila's unpredictable world, he soon found himself once again standing dangerously close to whatever chaos she created next. New trouble was already quietly forming on the horizon, and Deacon would soon have no choice but to confront more emotional drama connected directly to Sheila's increasingly dangerous demands. As loyalties continued shifting, relationships fractured under unbearable pressure, and long-buried tensions exploded back into the open. The coming days promised wave after wave of devastating consequences. In true The Bold and the Beautiful fashion, nobody would emerge untouched. Because in a world where love, family, ambition, and betrayal collide so violently, even the smallest decision can ignite consequences powerful enough to change everything forever. As the fallout from Hope Logan's stunning power move continued spreading through Los Angeles like wildfire, the emotional fractures running through both the Logan and Forrester families began widening in ways no one could easily repair. What initially looked like a bold business decision was now evolving into something far more dangerous, a deeply personal war where loyalty, family bonds, and years of trust were being tested all at once. Inside the glittering world of high fashion, every conversation had turned tense, every alliance suddenly felt uncertain, and every carefully hidden resentment was beginning to rise violently to the surface. The victory celebrations surrounding the Spencer family was still ongoing, but behind that moment of triumph lurked the undeniable reality that their success had come at an enormous emotional cost. What one side viewed as a brilliant strategic win, the other side saw as a devastating betrayal that threatened everything they had spent years building. And with tensions escalating by the hour, the conflict was nowhere near reaching its breaking point. Within the halls of Forrester Creations, the damage control efforts were becoming increasingly desperate as executives struggled to answer relentless pressure from the media. The fashion world had become obsessed with Hope's dramatic defection, and journalists were circling like predators, demanding explanations for how one of the company's most recognizable creative forces had walked away so suddenly. Every unanswered question only intensified speculation, making the company appear more vulnerable with every passing moment. For the Forresters, reputation had always meant everything, and now that reputation was being challenged publicly in front of the entire industry. Employees whispered nervously through hallways once filled with confidence, sensing that the company's internal fractures were becoming impossible to hide. The polished exterior of power and prestige that had defined their legacy for decades was beginning to crack, and everyone inside could feel the pressure building towards something even worse. At the center of this emotional unraveling stood Eric Forrester, still struggling to process the painful discovery that Donna had chosen silence when honesty mattered most. For Eric, business betrayals were something he had learned to navigate throughout his long career, but betrayal inside his marriage carried an entirely different kind of pain. Every moment he replayed the situation in his mind, the hurt only deepened. The fact that Donna had known about Hope's involvement with Logan and failed to warn him left him questioning how long secrets had been quietly accumulating around him without his knowledge. The disappointment was written clearly across his face, not with explosive anger, but with the far heavier emotion of heartbreak. Sometimes, betrayal from the people closest to you leaves wounds far deeper than anything caused by enemies, and Eric was beginning to understand that painful truth more clearly than ever before. Elsewhere, Electra Forrester found herself emotionally spiraling as Will Spencer's secrecy forced her to reevaluate the foundation of their relationship. It wasn't merely the fact that he had kept Hope's hiring hidden from her, nor was it just the secret surrounding the new jewelry collection built around the dazzling Hope for the Future diamond. What hurt most was the realization that Will had consciously decided she wasn't important enough to trust with information everyone else seemed to know. That painful awareness lingered heavily in every quiet moment, forcing her to question whether their relationship had ever been built on the honesty she believed they shared. The beach house they once called home now carried an unbearable emotional weight, each familiar room serving as a painful reminder of trust that had quietly begun eroding long before she realized it. And with every passing hour, the possibility of walking away completely started feeling less like an overreaction and more like necessary self-preservation. Not far away, Deacon Sharp found himself wrestling with emotions of an entirely different kind after his encounter with Remy Price. Remy had approached him, carrying what appeared to be genuine sincerity, congratulating him after the chaos of the fashion show, while quietly hoping this might finally become the moment he earned another opportunity. The desperation behind his request was impossible to miss. Remy clearly understood how much he needed redemption, and somewhere deep down, Deacon recognized that struggle better than most. After all, second chances had played a defining role throughout Deacon's own complicated life journey. But despite understanding the desire for forgiveness, Deacon couldn't ignore the reality standing in front of him. Some wounds require time before healing becomes possible, and right now, he simply wasn't prepared to gamble on trust again. Meanwhile, Brooke Logan's emotional world was unraveling faster than anyone expected, as anger and heartbreak began colliding with overwhelming force. Learning that Katie had actively helped recruit Hope into this shocking corporate betrayal left Brooke feeling blindsided by her own family. The pain wasn't rooted solely in professional loyalty or business competition. It ran far deeper than that. Brooke had always believed family should stand together when everything else falls apart. But now it felt as though even her own sister had quietly chosen sides against her. Years of complicated family history, unresolved tension, and buried resentment suddenly came rushing to the surface all at once. Her confrontation with Katie carried the intensity of someone no longer willing to stay silent, and as harsh words were exchanged, it became painfully obvious this conflict had transformed into something much uglier than simple disagreement. This was family division unfolding in real time. Hope, meanwhile, understood the emotional devastation her actions had caused, and eventually, she found herself standing face to face with Brooke, desperate to repair what now felt dangerously broken between them. The confidence she had shown publicly began fading the moment she confronted her mother privately. Beneath all the boldness and ambition that fueled her recent decisions, there remained a daughter desperately seeking understanding. Hope wanted forgiveness, but more than that, she wanted Brooke to see beyond the betrayal and somehow understand the reasons behind the choices that led her down this path. She needed reassurance that, despite everything, her mother could still be proud of her. But Brooke had been carrying too much pain for too long, and emotional exhaustion had pushed her dangerously close to losing control completely. The possibility of Brooke throwing both Hope and Liam out of her house no longer felt like an empty threat. It felt like an explosion, waiting for the smallest spark. As the calendar moved closer toward the week of July 6th through July 10th, another confrontation loomed over everyone involved like an approaching storm no one could escape. The inevitable clash between Hope Logan and Steffy Forrester Finnegan had become impossible to avoid. Their complicated history already carried years of rivalry, jealousy, resentment, and emotional wounds that never fully healed, and Hope's latest decision had reopened every painful chapter between them. Steffy was not the kind of woman who quietly tolerated betrayal, especially when that betrayal threatened both family and business. The anger building inside her had been growing steadily, waiting for the moment she finally stood face to face with Hope again. When that confrontation finally happened, emotions would undoubtedly erupt with full force. But standing unexpectedly between them might be Liam Spencer, whose loyalty to Hope threatened to complicate the situation even further. What made the situation even more explosive was the dangerous truth still waiting beneath the surface. The possibility that Steffy would soon learn Liam had secretly encouraged Hope to make this dramatic move in the first place. If that revelation came out, everything would change instantly. Until now, Steffy's anger had been directed primarily at Hope, but discovering Liam's hidden involvement would strike far deeper than she expected. Liam was someone woven deeply into Steffy's complicated emotional history, and learning he played a direct role in helping Hope build this brand new Logan line would feel like betrayal on a profoundly personal level. It would reopen old wounds connected to love, heartbreak, trust, and years of unresolved emotional history between them. In a single devastating moment, what began as fashion rivalry could spiral into emotional destruction, touching every corner of their already fragile relationships. And once that truth surfaced, there would be no reversing the damage. Yet, while the glamorous fashion empire continued collapsing under mounting pressure, another dangerous storm was quietly gathering elsewhere, centered once again around the unpredictable and deeply unsettling Sheila Carter. Sheila had never been someone who accepted rejection quietly, and now she remained firmly locked in conflict involving Taylor Hayes and the unresolved divorce battle still hanging over everyone involved. Her refusal to sign the divorce papers had become a dangerous power move designed to force the family into giving her exactly what she wanted. More than anything, Sheila remained fixated on one demand: securing visitation rights with Finn and young Hayes. She wasn't asking politely anymore. She wanted Taylor to pressure Steffy into allowing 2 days every month with both Finn and Hayes, a demand carrying emotional consequences far larger than anyone wanted to face. To Sheila, this wasn't simply negotiation. It was a battle for access to the family connection she refused to surrender. Taylor understood immediately how catastrophic this request could become, especially considering Steffy's already fragile emotional state. With the Logan chaos dominating her thoughts and professional betrayal weighing heavily on her shoulders, Steffi was already balancing more stress than anyone around her fully appreciated. Taylor knew that introducing Sheila's demands now would only trigger another emotional explosion, worsening an already unstable situation. She tried explaining this carefully, warning Sheila that pushing too aggressively at this moment would almost certainly backfire. But patience had never been Sheila's strength. The mere thought of losing access to Finn and Hayes fueled her obsession even further, making compromise nearly impossible. Ignoring every warning placed before her, Sheila pressed harder, demanding that Taylor stop delaying and begin influencing Steffi immediately, no matter how disastrous the timing seemed. Unfortunately, Deacon Sharp once again found himself caught dangerously close to Sheila's growing storm. Every time it seemed he might finally find peace, Sheila's increasingly volatile behavior pulled him right back into chaos he could never fully escape. The troubling reality was becoming harder to ignore. Sheila's desperation was growing stronger, her demands were escalating, and the emotional destruction surrounding her was expanding toward everyone connected to her world. Deacon knew better than most that when Sheila became obsessed with something, consequences usually followed close behind. And now, as family loyalties shattered, romantic relationships grew increasingly unstable, and powerful rivalries threatened to explode beyond repair, the days ahead promised emotional devastation on every front. In the unpredictable universe of the bold and the beautiful, love and betrayal often exist side by side, and sometimes the choices people make in pursuit of family, ambition, or revenge can ignite consequences so powerful that they change lives forever. The storm had only just begun, and for everyone involved, the worst was still waiting ahead.